interesting. Yeah. What I mean, what did you? I would give him a D4, right? D4 plus strength. What improvised weapon? What would you do?
Yeah, at least you got a projectile that's going to do some damage, you know? I
Hmm.
mean, I
At
think
least get
that's
his
probably what I
attention.
would do. Yeah. Well, you'd have to just it'd be death by 1,000 cuts or a
Hmm.
1,000 dimes. All right, I think it's your turn.
Um, I'm gonna go with alchemy, Chuck. I went back and forth,
Mhm.
because it's something that like people are like, oh, and then they forget they have it. But if you think about it, what can you do? I got it in front of me. It makes, I think it's 10 gallons. Oh, and 8 gallons of fresh or 12 gallons of salt water.
Mm.
So right away, it's like create water, but two, it can pump out acid. It can pump out poison, right? Everyone's like, oh, it makes beer. I have an infinite supply of beer. Awesome. Funny. But like you start collecting, I don't know, using the honey to make things sticky or just to sell them. But like, yeah, oil, super useful. Acid, poison, super useful things. And if you have an infinite supply of them, now you're starting to, this thing coats every arrow that you shoot in poison if you take the time to set yourself up right.
Hmm.
Um, and then
So
also just like an absurd amount of mayonnaise, right? What is the yeah, 2 gallons of mayonnaise, which makes me a little queasy. But yeah, if somebody came
if
up
you
with a
have
use
the
for that.
chef feat, then that could come in handy.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think when you mentioned back to back poison and honey, it reminded me of something. I think it's in Suetonius. It might be in Livy. It's the army, the Roman army apparently came into camp that had been abandoned by the German. The I guess it was the Arminius, his tribe. I forget what the name of the tribe was, but they were in Germania, and there was all this honey there, right? Well, the honey had been made by bees who had I think it was hemlock. I think it was
Mm.
they had made it from hemlock flower, so it was poisonous. So the Romans found this like abandoned camp with a bunch of different food supplies. The honey was in there as well, and the Germans basically used poison to incapacitate much of the legion. So then that's based on like an historical source. I don't know how true it is, but interesting. So you could play something that way too with
And
the alchemy
those are
jar.
the and those are the stories that get told 2,000 years later, right? Like, I don't know. There was one Visigoth with a big axe, right? And he did a lot of damage, but like, yeah, they were clever enough to poison the honey and leave it behind, and literally they honey trapped us.
Yeah, literally the honey trap. Yeah.
Um,
I think that,
mm,
it's interesting for me I think that's why I read history so much. The I love fiction. I was a fiction writing major, but I also had a minor in history. And if I went on for my graduate stuff, I probably would have gone for history because there's so many good stories and it's hard to like make these things up. Although I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there were historians at the time who took license with some of it to exaggerate, and some are more reliable than others. But even if there's a kernel of truth in that, it says a lot about the Romans and being able. One of the things I like about the Romans is they in general it seems like they're willing to admit their defeats, and that makes for a story because then they're the underdog when they do win, right?
hmm. Hmm.
If you're just like, oh, we won every time, ha ha ha, ha, that story gets boring after a while. And the same with D&D. Like, if you let
Hmm.
your characters get away with murder untouched, no damage taken, like they're going